Evening. This is Nick with Let's Write Tonight. This is the first episode of this series, so I just wanted to introduce myself and what the channel is all about and get you spun up on exactly what the goals are and what we hope to accomplish together. So let's get started. As you can see in the background here, it's the Let's Write Tonight website. This whole project stemmed from my sheer personal extreme procrastination and lack of motivation to sit down and just finish a story I started a few years ago. And I thought the best way to do this is to establish a group of creatives like you and me and to motivate one another to get stuff written in a timely manner on schedule with a routine in place. So for 1 hour for every Saturday, this is something we're going to sit down and do together. So the website is going to be a place where people, as they finish their projects, we can collaborate on those and get them posted, and eventually we'll even start doing some shared readings. And I think that would be really great. The website also takes you over to the YouTube channel, which is where we'll be posting the final edited videos of these streams together. And those will be for folks in their future reference later on. Furthermore, we've got the Patreon. This is just for fun. I've got a full-time job in addition to all this. This is Flo, by the way. No expectation at all that anyone contributes, but if you do, I appreciate it. We have it set up for you to do that if you want to. The story that we're going to start working on is the Volition. This is something, like I said, I started a few years ago, and is really the prime mover of this project and starting the Let's Write Tonight team. The idea is that on every Saturday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, if you log on to join me on my Twitch stream, what we're going to do is we're going to pull up this story, and I'm going to work on this story, and this is an opportunity for you to start working on yours, and we can share ideas and be there for one another while we get through this. This is not impossible, writing a story. Many people do it. Many people get published. And I think it's realistic that we can do it together on Saturdays. While we go through these stories, some of the things I'd like to talk about together is story structure, character development, good writing routines and best practices. A few other things I think we would really benefit together from talking about. One of the things that I learned the hard way when it came to this stream and picking a title for a story is, what's in a name? The Let's Write Tonight title sounds good, and it's based on a few other slogans that I've had in my life. And all the while I was setting up the channel and the LLC to manage any income that's ever made on the channel, I had it in my head that I'd be waking up in the mornings, getting dressed, showering, having breakfast, and then sitting down and doing this. But what I ended up doing was calling it Let's Write Tonight, which didn't jive with a Saturday morning routine. So that's a good example of why you want to make sure that when you're picking a title, you do it properly. The second thing I want to talk about today is what's a good place? When do you know it's time to get started writing a story? And for me, that stems from music I hear, to events in my life, and to dreams I've had. And really, it's taking those different variables and different points of input and making it a habit of capturing those so that in the event that you want to add them to a story, you can in the future. And the third thing we're going to talk about today is paying attention to your subconscious and the world around you. And that's really more like topic 2, part 2. But it's about having the discipline to take that input and write it down so that you don't forget, because you will forget. So topic 1, how I picked the name. Like I said, the Let's Write Tonight is sort of its own first case hiccup for me on this program. I don't mind doing Saturday evenings. It's fine. The Volition title is something that I have been editing a lot lately, and you'll see on the right here under the table of contents, it's labeled Hobson's Choice and Occam's Razor for parts 1 and 2. Those are two philosophical positions where a Hobson's choice is the illusion of free will, where a person is told they have free will, they believe they have free will, but when it comes time to exercise that freedom, their options are limited, that their freedom is irrelevant. And then the Occam's Razor is when faced with two choices that you can't decide between, you use the Occam's Razor and choose the decision that you're thinking the least about. Because in your subconscious, you've already evaluated the value or quality of both decisions. And by thinking about one decision more than the other, you're trying to justify it as least as good as the other decision that you haven't really thought much about. And that's based on the story. Because, and I'll give you the quick synopsis for the Volition, and then we'll move on with this topic. But the whole point of the Volition is it's about a boy who grows up to a young man, to a man in his middle age, who knows when he's going to die based on dreams he's had of a plane crash he's in. And the story follows this individual as they grow up with this belief, sincere belief, that they know that their demise is in the relatively distant future, and sort of how that young person would go through life with that experience, and how that would influence the choices they make in life. And that's all part of Hobson's choice, where he doesn't think he has the choice, and so it's his process of growing up thinking he just has this destiny. The Occam's Razor is when that destiny is finally revealed to, in fact, be up to him. Points in his life and different timelines and different events have synchronized together to where he recognizes the sign of the times in his life, and he knows that it's getting close. And when the time to board the plane comes, he's faced with the choice of continuing living like he had, fearless, or avoiding that flight and taking a different route. So, the story is obviously still in production, but that's sort of what motivated the titles. And the Volition is more or less just another phrase for the prophecy. When you're picking a title, you really don't need to start with the title. It's something that I think you would benefit most from deriving from the story itself. And so that's going to take us to that second topic, which is starting with a notepad and 3 sentences. So whenever I write, or I think of a new story, or I think of something I want to, in the future, develop into a final product, the very first thing I do is I take that idea and I jot it down. However incomplete or incoherent it might be, in 1 or 2 sentences, this is what the story is about. And you just save that for later. But that's a start. So when the stream is over today, what I hope you'll do is you'll sit down with your notepad and you'll write down 1 or 2 sentences based on the idea you have. And next week when we sit down again on Saturday, that's what you start from. And that's when we'll really get into the weeds on writing these stories. Today's just an introduction. But your cell phone and the notepad functions on your phone, if you're just sitting in line or you're on a bus or a plane or whatever you're doing where you're sitting idle, instead of going through your Instagram feeds, which I think are hilarious, but instead of wasting time doing those, take out a notepad and just jot down some ideas. And it's not necessarily the hard part, but it's that crucial first step that unless you do that, you're never going to really get the ball rolling on anything else. And then finally, pay attention to your subconscious and the world around you. So the way I write, the stories have their own themes, but the way I put them together in my mind and then I pace the story is based on a song, I think, that fits the mood and the tempo of the situation that I'm trying to convey in the story. So for each of these chapters, shown here in parts 1 and 2, I actually have a scene written that's based on a song that I'm matching, that I'm trying to keep the tempo to, and sort of I use it to guide the emotion that I'm trying to achieve from the reader. So, for instance, the gift is when this young man is going to school and he first starts having his dreams on a recurring basis. He starts trying to avoid those dreams, and the dreams start tearing him apart. For those series of scenes, I have a musical score that kind of takes him from his highs to his lows. And by the end of the gift, he's really struggling as a character in his personal life. In chapter 2, Here Am I, this is where the character sort of comes out of his low point, and he starts to accept his situation, although he still doesn't quite understand it or its implications. And there's a real point in this chapter where he realizes the hard way what the consequences are of making choices based on your own perceived invincibility, because the world doesn't revolve around you, as this character learns. That music it gets uplifting. They start to experiment with their existence. They start to realize their potential, and then they hit that wall. So the music I sort of picked for that series to help motivate the writing is it's more uplifting, but then it just crashes into sheer tragic and misplaced sense of heroism. Let's put it that way. Chapter 3 is the slow crawl out of that pit that character finds themselves in. And it's where they really start to mature as an individual and not quite jump in feet first with their experiences in their daily life like they did in chapter 2, where spread out over the course of a few years, the character now recognizes experiences and explores their belief in their situation with slightly less significant ramifications for catastrophic failure. Part 2 of Occam's Razor, the character is fully grown, and now we're looking into more mature, more relatable scenes, I think, for most adult readers. The first part's much more of an adventure, whereas part 2 is, okay, the adventure's over. Now you're just an adult with a history and a past, and now you're representing other people in your life. It's not about you anymore. And the character continues to learn how to navigate that, finds a love interest, has to deal with that, believing that they know their situation throughout chapters 4 and 5, and then in finally chapter 6, the character has to make the choice whether or not, one, they believe that for the last 30 or 40 years of their life that their situation is what it is, and then 2, making a decision based on that, whether or not to get on the plane and fulfill their destiny, or for the first time in their life evade a risk that they hadn't expected, or that they had expected. Let me just say that when you're writing, don't worry about chapters. I'll tell you now, I wasted a whole lot of time trying to decide if this should be chapter 1 or if it should be chapter 2 or a prelude. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, when you start writing, just let it go and just write. It's not worth the time or energy. What I ended up deciding to do is taking a scene from when the child was really, really young, and it was their first experience with the nightmare that they have. I took that scene and I broke it down into a prelude, because that's what I'm going to use for any pre-reads that I send when it's time for this thing to get sent to be published, which, if we do this right, it should be before the end of the year. When I write, another thing you'll see on YouTube or in blogs, when you write, you're not supposed to go back and correct what you've already written. Well, I'll tell you right now, I did that throughout the process of writing the 3 pages I actually do have. And again, this has been many years in the process. Slightly ashamed to admit, but I started this late in high school, and I've dabbled in it ever since, never letting it out of my mind, but I've only gotten 23 solid pages out of it. And that's a product of my own indiscipline, which is why we're here now. Don't get caught up trying to correct the language or the words or the grammar that you're using. What's important is you just get that information out, because when you come back later, like I've done here, if you don't like something or it needs attention, just highlight it in yellow, and then it's a lot easier to just, search for what's highlighted in yellow on Word and just snap to it rather than rereading chapter 1 600 times and trying to get every little grammar point perfect. Publishers have editors, and they're going, from what I understand, I haven't published yet. I hope this is my first product, but they're going to rip this thing apart. So, look at it that way. What's your time worth? Are you going to let that get you down, or are you just going to accept that that's the reality and get an 80% solution out before you commit to refinement? So yeah, let's see. Some of the other things we're going to talk about in the future on the future streams. What I set up was a hero's journey template based on the website idea-sandbox.com. Here they provide their write-up based on Star Wars and following Luke Skywalker and his path through the hero's journey from steps 1 through 12. And they break it down into acts 1, 2, and 3. I did something similar here where, so here's this. I broke down my character in part 1 in this sense. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. So this character, his call to adventure is a sudden surge of nightmares. His increased awareness about those nightmares and where they strike him. And that's sort of where the story really picks up while he's in high school. It's his ordinary world experience. The nightmares are just that, nightmares. He doesn't understand them. He doesn't realize his place with them. And so that's his refusal to the call for the adventure and his refusal to sleep. And the story gets more into that. But the hero's journey is a great template to follow if you're not used to character development, because this is a great way to take a sort of scopeless, vague idea you have, not bad, just scopeless and vague, taking it and giving you the chance to put it down and cut it up into a format such as this, because this is what's going to let you take that story and figure out what you're going to do with it. Let's see. One of the programs that I've used in the past is called Campfire Write. This, I would say that if you don't already own any sort of special writing software, or you need help breaking something down because you've never done this before and you're not really sure you don't know what you don't know when it comes to writing, Campfire Write is an excellent tool, because its whole sole purpose is to help guide writers along in their story development. And I'll tell you right now, it does have I think it's a subscription service. For like $5 or $10 a month. I'll tell you now that if you have a story and you're working on it and you haven't done one before, I submit to you this is a great product to use, because if you don't know your own character, it's going to make it really hard to make them consistent throughout your story and to impart to the reader the character development that they're going through because of that inconsistency. So in the future, I'll go through Campfire Write with you all so that you see how it works, and I strongly encourage you to take a look at it yourself and take what you can out of it. So that's the channel, folks. I hope you're interested. I hope you're excited. Again, for next Saturday, what I'd like you to do is come back with your notes with your, again, it can be vague and scopeless. Just take an idea that you've had in your mind for a while, write it down, and what we're going to do is when we come back next week, we're actually going to start producing work based on that. So thanks for following along, and I hope to see you next time.